What's making? What's making?
Hello, colleagues in community affairs. My name is Elizabeth Ipinge, and this is Behind My Back. This podcast serves to identify, discuss, and demythify common societal stereotypes, stigmas, and prejudices. Behind My Back is a podcast that exposes issues that are often whispered about by putting them under the spotlight and speaking about them out in the open on a public platform. We aim to make it okay to speak out loudly about topics that are often viewed as taboo or embarrassing. I believe strongly that this will encourage communities to have more open and honest conversations about issues that matter, thus potentially getting rid of the visible division amongst Namibians due to the stigma. Listeners are reminded that the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of the podcast, nor those of the podcast's management. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. The Behind My Back podcast and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, service, or ethnic community.
Why must I, as a woman who does not have kids, accept a man who has 4, 5, 6 different kids from 3 different mothers, but I, who has one child or 2, cannot have a boyfriend? And I'm not looking for a father for my child. Let's say a scenario of me and my child's father are not together, but he's very much present in the child's life. But I am looking for a companion. Why is it taken that I am looking for a father for my child and not a boyfriend for myself? Because that's not the case. I'm not looking for a father for my child. My child has a father. I'm looking for a partner. So what if I come with my own money, and then what will be society's notion on this? It's a thing of women are inferior to men, and men are supposed to be handled in a certain way as opposed to women. Even in the same situation, like a man is supposed to be accepted, a woman is always supposed to be questioned. Bad thinking, really bad thinking, and it's sad.
I think women are judged because of that notion, and it's obviously we're in a patriarchal society. It's that misogynical ideologies from also Christianities and the religions that we aspire to as a patriarchal society, that women should be sort of modest and whatever, and that's why they are treated like that if they have more kids. So it's like they are already termed to be as hoes, and that you lose a certain value of yourself. And it's not just that men hold that standard for women, it's that also women play into it.
Today's topic is She is Just Looking for a Father for Her Kids, where we address the stigma that surrounds young mothers who are unmarried and have multiple children. Joining us in studio today is Auburn Muluti, who is a young father himself with no current aspirations towards marriage. We are also joined by Rosvita Ndubu, who will be sharing her opinions from the perspective of a young woman with no children yet. I'd like for us to start off by, just establishing what the general perception you each have regarding this topic. What is it that comes to your mind when the topic comes up about a young mother who is a mother to not 1 but 2 or more children and has a specific romantic interest in, a man somewhere? What comes to your mind?
I think for me, if I may, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the dynamics of dating, and how as time goes and as people find themselves in different circumstances, their requirement from a partner changes or it evolves. So I think it's basically just the relation of circumstances to people and how that determines what the requirements are for when they start dating. So, for example, a person with kids, how might that influence your dating? Would having kids influence your choice? Would it be a consideration? And how might that practically play out? So I think for me, the first thing that comes to mind is in terms of relationship. How do these people then navigate dating with kids?
What I'm picking up from what you have just said, Rose, is that those are things that should come up at the beginning of the relationship before anything else is established. Maybe it's a discussion that should be held as to what our individual requirements are when it comes to establishing a relationship. Am I understanding this correctly?
Correct, 100%. I think the foundation of every relationship, if it's not based on authenticity and truth of the other person's lived experience, then I don't think it stands. And I think kids is not something that you can hide away from another person. And it's something that's very essential. You know, there are people that say, I can't date someone with kids, you know, so that automatically disqualifies certain people from the dating pool. So I think above it all, I think yes, it does really play like a big role.
I think I'll approach it from a different angle just a little bit, to say generally society and to some extent myself. I know, like Rosvita rightfully said, there's so much dynamics involved in this conversation, but when I look at it generally and what society has instilled in all of us, the first thing that comes to mind, she has multiple children. She now wants to be in a relationship with me, right? Usually the woman would not want to be in a relationship with somebody who is not financially stable, right? Or somebody who is not at that financial level, at a satisfactory financial level. So for me, I would go also as far as to say that, look, I believe many times when women are making the decision to get into a relationship and they have multiple children, they are going to consider the well-being of their children. So in most cases, the relationship will not entirely be prompted by love per se. It will be something she will look at the convenience of the situation to say that, okay, I love this guy, but can this person actually take care of me and my kids? Especially considering that a large number of single mothers of multiple children, a large number of them in this country are not unemployed or underemployed. So I think that's the angle I would like to take it from, to say that it becomes a little bit of a danger whereby these women are getting into relationships for convenience instead of for love.
Okay, well, that's okay. There's two angles that I'd like to approach the next question from, but let me take the one side first. I mean, what you said with regards to the financial differences perhaps between the two parties involved, and in most cases, this young lady with the children seeming like the one who is more dependent or who is seeking more of that financial support than their male counterpart. This brings us now to the issue of societal expectations, as you have correctly put it. We know that there are certain established gender roles in society, right? And one of the biggest ones that we have is that men are expected to be the providers within a family structure, and that is the way that a man actually expresses love in most cases. And so don't you think it's taking away from that then, regardless of whether these are his biological children or not? Fact is that he is in a situation where he's trying to establish a relationship, and hopefully a long-lasting relationship with this woman. He loves who she is. He should love her for who she is, regardless of whether she has children or not, especially seeing that these are the same exact expectations that women are placed underneath. Yeah, that it could be a woman with no children at all, but then at the end of the day, when there's a man who approaches her and he may be a father to, whatever number of children, she should accept him for who he is and whatever else, as long as he's doing his job as a provider. What are your thoughts then when it takes that sort of direction?
Yeah, look, one of the main reasons I am here is to provide a personal perspective in terms of experience. So I personally have kids, right? More than one. I have never been in a relationship where I was required, or where the woman I was in a relationship was required to take care of my children financially or whatsoever. So, and the reason why I'm saying this is that if you have to look at the numbers, percentages, most relationships I have known, it's, we always talk about social status, right? Usually because of you spoke about how society view things. So usually in our society, there's a very, very small chance that you will find a successful woman dating in a serious relationship with a man who is below her financial status or that sort of her level. So what I'm trying to say basically is that in most cases, as a man, you are expected to be better off financially than a woman. This is according to society's expectations. So obviously, I as a man taking a woman in now with her how many ever children, if I accept that that's the situation, right?
Yeah.
Then fine, we can be in a relationship. But that's not my issue. My issue is then the woman in the relationship, is she with me for the right reasons, love, care, or whatever? Or is she just in it because she feels like, no, this guy can provide for me and my children? This is how I am viewing things.
On that note, Ms. Rose, I'd like for you to just chime in and tell us maybe your thoughts on what Orban has just said, because I'm seeing it. Okay, he has said a mouthful really, and there's many things we can actually pinpoint and just touch on. But then he spoke of in most cases it's the man that is expected to provide financially, which is truly the case. But then we're living also in a modern society. And at the end of the day, the aim of this show is to sort of demystify the existing stereotypes. And I feel that is one of the stereotypes right now, that men are expected to provide financially, especially seeing how things have developed. You'd find women who even identify as cougars, for example, and they don't mind dating even a younger guy who is clearly going to be, in most cases, less financially established than she is, because these are usually women who are well established. Sometimes they have kids, sometimes they do not. Sometimes it's a case where the young man is the one with kids, and this woman would even end up supporting both him and his children. So that's just one of the examples in which society has sort of restructured in that aspect. And also another aspect is that you'd find women who do just not, regardless of whether she's older than the young man or not, she may just, some women look at relationships as a partnership. And for them, it's like, okay, if we're getting into this and we're serious, what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. And if you have kids, I don't mind helping to take care of these kids. I'd have the same expectation. But then when it comes to women, it's totally something else. You can't come with your kids, whatever else. How harsh do you think the stigma is on women in comparison to men?
Yeah, okay. So while Oben was speaking, there were a few things that I noted that I wanted to respond to, actually. But I think my response to the last question that you just asked now, on how the consequence of single parenthood is deemed to be more harsh on, let's say, single mothers, will tie into, I think, the first response that I have for Oben. Because while he was speaking, I noticed he touched on the fact that when he dates a woman, for example, the financial or emotional, psychological burden of him being a single father or of raising his kid does not necessarily transfer on his partner. And I think one of the reasons that happens in my reasoning, or what I've observed, is that to a very large degree, like, men are not usually the ones that stay with their kids, right? So you can have like a man that has 10 kids, not saying Oben has 10 kids, we don't know. But
You never know.
so you might have a man that has kids that are this town, that town, and so forth. So if he ends up, let's say, in Marinta or Tsumeb and whatever not, and in that town he does not have a child, essentially he lives the life of a bachelor, because there are no kids attached to him that can then show about or bring about his single fatherness. Although he might have kids, they don't necessarily have an impact on his life on a day-to-day basis, to the extent that it then impacts any relationship that he might enter into, right? Because it's one thing for you to be in a relationship and say, oh, I have a child. And it's another thing to be in a relationship and say, oh, I have a child, but then the child is actively present, right? So you guys would need to consider the child in that relationship, If you guys are going to move in together, is you, your person, and then the child. So I think that's one of the reasons why I think for men, the burden of being a single parent might not necessarily transfer on their partner, because they, most of the time, right, don't have the child physically, And I think that's why the stigma is most of the time placed upon the woman, because People always say, if you get pregnant, my dear, it's the man's maybe, but for you, it's an assured responsibility because it's yours. You carried this child. You can't run away from this child, although you have women that do that. And I think that's why there is so much burden placed upon women in relation to men. Because I think with them, it's a physical consequence that they have to carry with themselves. You get those ones that run away and then leave their kids and whatever not. But in most instances, it's highly likely to find the woman with the child than the opposite. Moving on to the second issue I wanted to touch on from Auburn, it was actually a very valid point, and I think it was a very interesting perspective to hear in that, because I was saying I'm of the opinion that, I think that's also where we agree. I'm of the opinion that you choose as much as you can allow and tolerate in your life, right? So if you find a beautiful woman like me, and you find me with kids and you are like, I really like you, but the kid situation is not it, right? Then just be upfront and then leave, and go somewhere where that won't be a burden. So I really believe that if people are authentic and they're forthcoming, for example, if Auburn tells you, no, I have kids, right? And you like Auburn, but you would prefer Auburn without kids. You can't then come and dictate in his life over a circumstance that is already there. It's a factual circumstance that he's living through. So now you get women or men that come into people's lives and then they're like, no, I don't want to hear anything about your kids. It's like they totally disregard the kids, and the kids, they want to live like the kids do not exist. And I think that's what I have an issue with. And I always keep saying that you must always tolerate and allow to the degree that you can. If you get a man that is willing to take on a woman and the kids and the responsibility and the financial responsibility and whatever, that should be a conscious choice that they make. And if they choose to do that, then kudos to them, right? But if a man, on the other hand, or a woman also decides that's not for me, that's not my cup of tea, I will end up probably being abusive in the situation, or I will sideline your kids or whatever not, then that's also fine. But I think it's then just to say that as human beings, we must be honest with ourselves and with what we are willing to allow in our interest, but also in the interest of the person that we might be pursuing. If you know kids are a zero boundary for you that you can't cross, be honest and then leave it at that. But I think moving into what Auburn was saying on how you might not know if the person loves you for who you are, or if they love you because you are willing to take on who they are, plus their added baggage. I think that's a very valid point. I think in that situation, the question would then be that, okay, if the person demonstrates that they love you, right? And they love, because I think love also is a very transactional thing. All relationships are to a very large extent about what you can do for the other party, right? So I think it's also an internal thing to be like, okay, am I okay? Do I reconcile myself with the possibility that this woman or this man loves me, but they are more indebted? Would indebted be the right word? That they're thankful, man, for what I am doing for them. So that is a huge part of why we work. So I think it's then to reconcile with yourself as a human being to be that if that was the case, if they loved what I could do for them more than they love me, how would I feel about that? Is that okay or is that not okay? And I think it also depends on the dynamic of the relationship. Because I think in all relationships, we have our doubts and so forth. But I think if it's a really good thing, you love her, she loves you, you guys are happy, at the end of the day, then it should be fine, man.
I mean, at the end of the day, I guess we could look at this issue from, many perspectives as to what attributes to this, to the existence of some of these, the existence, not just, the actual stereotype, but the existence of the situation, finding young women with, multiple kids, they're not married, and people sort of refusing to associate with them, or vice versa even. And one would think, is this because maybe the acceptance of this from the perspective of men is more common because of what the structure has been like, historically speaking? Because if we look at our society, our Namibian society especially, it is, very common, almost a norm to find every second person or however many people without a father figure, having grown up without a father figure. And you learn that this parent of theirs is actually a man out there who even fathers how many other more children. But it's rarely the case. And like you said, for women, perhaps it's because it's difficult to just disassociate with your child completely like that. Because, you are the primary caretaker in all honesty. Like, you're the one who carries this baby. You're the one who brings the baby into this physical world and all of that. I don't know, I don't know if these are the reasons that, contribute to this weight being placed upon men in a more lighter fashion than it is on women. But also one would observe that even women now have started to sort of, younger women especially, it wasn't common in, the times of our moms, but younger women now, our age mates or younger even, would really find themselves easily in situations where they abandon their kids with their grandmothers or with other relatives just so they can go out there and still pursue the Thrive life, And one would wonder then, is it because they feel that pressure? They don't want to be associated with that pressure or that stigma that, you're a single mother or whatever else. Or they feel maybe that, okay, this child is cutting my life short. I need to go out there. Or I don't know. It's so many things, surrounding that. But then do you think then this is one of the stigma that surrounds the issue? Do you guys think perhaps this is one of the biggest contributors to child abandonment, the issue of child abandonment in Namibia?
Yes, I do agree, first and foremost, that it is a contributor. Like, especially you mentioned with the younger ladies. I myself am from deep there in Katutura in the location. I see these things with my own eyes to say that sometimes you find a young girl with a kid and they are hanging with her peers, right? So Friday they want to go out, but she has the kid, she has to abba the kid and all that and breastfeed and whatever. But sometimes, I don't know if it's peer pressure or the fact that I'm also still young, I want to go have fun out there. The poor grandmothers, the aunties and the elder people, especially at home, they are the ones who are left with the kids. Sometimes it's even a thing of, just watch him for 5 minutes. I just want to go to the shop, and just all of a sudden it's a whole weekend she has disappeared. So yes, to answer your question, I do believe it's a contributing factor. Now, also before I continue, or before we continue, I just want to also touch on what Rose was speaking on. I think you spoke about how the burden or how a woman basically cannot disassociate themselves entirely from their child. Whereas a man, it's more easier for a man to do so, because in most cases we don't live with our children, especially if we are not still together with the baby mama.
True.
Now, I will admit something that the guys will probably go kill me for at the men's conference later this year. So you know what? One thing, us men, one thing that we do also, another thing, like myself. If I find a lady, if I find a lady who I like, but it's just this temporary like type of things. You don't see this person as somebody you'll be willing to grow old with or whatever.
Yeah.
If I see somebody I like for the moment, I'm not going to tell her about my kids. She has no business knowing my personal stuff so far as my kids and whatever. So I'll probably date this person for a month and without mentioning my kids, and then move on from her and go to somebody else.
Okay, let me pause you there.
All right.
Let me pause you there. Like, okay, you feel that it's none of their business in that situation because it best suits you. Because you are in the mood to have a good time with this person, you're attracted to them. So you feel it's none of their business because you don't have any actual long-term plans with them.
Yes.
But you do have kids, and you are excluding this very essential piece of information, because now I assume you and this young lady will be getting intimate at one point or another, and things happen. What if she ends up then telling you later on that she's pregnant, and you find out that she's not just pregnant now and potentially with your child, but also has children that she did not tell you about? And I mean, I want to know how you would then handle the situation, seeing that equally, the same way it wasn't her business for you to, express that you have a child or you have children.
Yeah.
She could argue the same. So what do you do then in a case like that? Is that not now just, extending the cycle? Like, It's just going in a loop.
And that's why it's okay to admit that we are not perfect and we're still working on ourselves. As men,
But why not give that same grace
Look,
to the woman?
But I think I do
wait, just to
understand.
answer the question briefly, then I give to you, Rose.
Yes, please.
So there's two things involved, right? The first one, like you said, I just want to have quick fun with this person and then mind my business after that. We all know about one night stands, flings, blah blah blah. These things that are not meant to extend beyond some few weeks, maybe months even.
Yeah.
Now the first reason is that just because I just want a short-term thing, but then the second reason is also because maybe judging by this person's personality, I'm going to assume that giving out that information automatically would take me down a few points in terms of how she views me now as a man. So she will be less interested in me. Obviously, if there's a scorecard, having kids there will deduct a few points. You understand? So sometimes it's also to protect my situation, maybe make her fall so deeply in love and then later tell her. Who knows, you know?
Ladies,
This is what they do.
ultimate deception.
Yeah, but then I do get you. I mean, it's obviously it's not fair on our part because so many things can be. Imagine she gets pregnant now, and if you already, for example, maybe have 5 kids, and then hers will be the 6th one, and it'll be just so much. You're actually bringing problems to your situation and also hers at the same time.
Yeah. For me, the women nowadays are not going to put up with as much nonsense, if we may call it that, like infidelity, other children out of wedlock, and so forth, like our grandparents did. I think it's because obviously circumstances have changed, right? I think we'd be the first to acknowledge that women in the 21st century are the most privileged that women have been ever. You know, we have the right to an education, we can do this and that and that. Back in the day, my grandmother did not work, for example. My grandfather was a sole breadwinner. My grandmother did not have an education. My grandmother did not have many options apart from being a housewife and remaining at home, even if my grandfather came back with like different kids or so forth. So I think that is generally why we see a disconnect between then and now in terms of females, because I think now women are more empowered and they have more choice, right? So women can decide if this man is doing this and this and this and she's not on board with it, she can just decide, no, I may want you, but I don't need you. My grandmother needed my grandfather because she couldn't drive. There was zero income. She couldn't go to work. Like there was literally nothing that she could do without a man. So she needed a man. It wasn't a thing of, there's nothing to debate about that. Women back then needed a man for their survival. Nowadays, women don't need a man necessarily, you know? Obviously, men are essential in women's life and so forth. But when it comes to need in terms of survival, it's not a need for a woman to have a man. It's preferable, yes, but it's not a need. So I think that's the disconnect. And I think that's why a lot of women nowadays are not willing to settle for a lot of things. So that's the first. The second thing, I think it's a thing of culture and values and morals that I think comes into play as it relates to that. Because I think first and foremost, it would tie into the fact that a lot of people are having kids young before they are prepared for the responsibility of having a kid. So if you have a kid, let's say at 17, 16, you're a child, essentially yourself. You're not prepared for the responsibility. Most of the peers around you are thriving. Hence why you feel like you should also go thrive, because you're in that stage where you are young, you want to thrive. These are apparently the best years of your life. So who's going to stay with the kids? Not you, because you have a thrive life to go to, right? So the burden then ends up on the mom, the grandparents, and so forth. But I think one of the contributing factors is that people are having kids very young before they are ready for the responsibility. And since they're the ones that cannot bear the responsibility, the people around them, you know, will then have to bear the responsibility. Be it the father's relatives, be it the mother's relatives, be it the fathers, the mothers, the grandparents. Somewhere, somehow, somebody is going to have to step in and fill in that gap. So I think it's that. And I think it's also just a thing. I always say that after a certain period, like, people have to take accountability for their actions. Like, I'm not shaming anyone, but I think if you are, let's say, 26 with 6 kids. That in itself is, I think, for me, indicative of a bigger problem that needs to be resolved. Because if you, let's say you have your first child by 16, by then you understand what sex leads to. Because how did you end up in this situation? Through sex, right? You had sex, unprotected sex, and now you have a baby.
A time where you have had received some
sexual education and so forth, especially after giving birth. Like I know public hospitals, they're very, adamant on, they provide you with like different, like, birth control options and whatever not and so forth.
Yeah.
So I think after a while, we really need to look at people's decision making and their accountability for their decisions. Because while I do understand that we're human, we're going to make mistakes, we're not perfect. But I think after a while, it's then up to us to then just, take accountability for our actions and be like, no, maybe 1 or 2 kids is enough. Mara, home girl. Or even you, my man, you get 20-something year olds that have 15 kids. How did you end up in that situation, my brother? Please. Yeah, so that's it for me.
Well, all right. Those are very powerful contributions from both our guests. We're coming to the end of our episode slowly. But before we close up, I'd just like to hear very briefly, just your final remarks. And within those remarks, we'd like to hear from you both individually, if you do not mind, that whether or not you are individually open to entertaining a partner who has children. Basically in your personal capacities, as you are right now, you, Rose, as a young woman without any children as yet, and you, Auburn, as a young man who is a father to more than one child. Auburn, you can go first.
Yeah. Final remarks. First, maybe let me start off by saying that as a young parent myself, most of the time there is no planning situation. I don't want to say the kids were a mistake, because like you rightfully said that at a certain age you already know what sex can lead to, but there's so many other factors involved.
True.
There's people who are in certain relationships, especially women with older men, maybe because of their circumstance at home and stuff like that. And if these men refuse to use condoms and stuff, it can lead to pregnancies. And as we know, abortion is illegal in this country unless you're raped. So many a times they can end up having 1 or even more kids just because of a certain mistake that happened, and after that they couldn't mitigate that mistake because of the laws and policies in place don't allow for that.
Yeah.
Let's also keep in mind that SRHR services are not accessible to everybody. Some young teenagers are afraid to get judged when they go get contraceptives or family planning or whatever. And then there's also another aspect of SCE, sexual comprehensive education. These are things that are made provision for in our education curriculums, but because of our conservativeness as a country, many parents do not actually agree with their children at a young age being taught about sex and whatnot. And so you'd find that many of these children do not have that comprehensive education that they actually need for that. So I think for me, all these things are contributing factors to the single young mothers and fathers out there. But then why I said that is just so that we cannot always point fingers to say why you made the wrong choices, you did this, you did that. There's also the part of circumstances, things that were out of the hands of the people. So I think in terms of final remarks, that's where I'll leave it. But then again, to answer your question about me personally, look, I already have a few kids myself. I think this is part of the reasons, like you said in my introduction, I'm not married, and I also alluded to you that I have not thought of planning to be married anytime soon. And this is also something that comes out because I already have multiple kids, right? So this opens up so many things to me. Will the stepmother treat the children correctly, properly? Will the women I actually want to be with accept me for that situation around me and my children, or will I just have to settle for whoever just because I have no choice and there's so much limitations because of my situation? But I respect a woman, a single woman, who, because me having been raised by a single mother myself, I respect a single woman with kids and who will do anything to take care of their kids. And I mean, I've been in a relationship with women with kids before, but I've never thought of getting married. I think this is something you guys will have to scrutinize the situation and say, financially, can we actually afford this?
I'm saying no. I am not willing to date anybody that has kids. And yeah, I stand behind that with my chest. Kidding. Yes, I think in terms of final remarks, I think it's just to say that grace should be extended as it relates to people's situations. Just to echo what Oban was saying, is that life is not black or white. We live a lot in the gray areas, and I think understanding and grace should be then applied and given to people as we live in the gray areas. I always say that we should not judge other people for sinning differently, right? Just because you feel like someone's life is not how it should have gone, or it's not in accordance to yours, does not mean that their life and their decisions are less valid. So I think all in all, it's just to say, take accountability for your actions, but from the other side, also be empathetic. And that is it.
All right. Well,
but if you have a child, please don't slide in my DMs. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much to both our guests. Just to really wrap up the essence of this discussion, we have learned that, reproduction has started, or I don't know, is happening at a very, not at a very young age. I mean, if we have to relate it to how early parents used to give birth before, I think the maturity levels are really what makes it different. Because as young as parents used to be back in the day, they were more matured. I think it's because they were taught to take on serious responsibilities from a very young age. While as we have 20-something-year-olds in our modern day who still prioritize things that do not really add too much value to life, such as the Thrive life. Yeah. And so they end up having kids. It's like kids having kids. And so this may lead to some of these issues that we have. And also that sometimes it's not by choice, but as a result of compromising issues, such as maybe someone who was taken advantage of, who was assaulted, and it may have resulted to, them having a child. And sometimes this happens on multiple occasions also, sadly. And in a case where one is, fully of sober mind and, and soul, I guess, in a case where you are fully aware of what you're doing, then accountability and responsibility should be taken in a case like that. Yeah. And as it may, reduce the potential of child abandonment by parents increasing. Yeah. And then also our guests spoke of the importance of really extending grace to others, as life is not really a straight arrow, and anyone really could find themselves in this sort of situation, regardless of whether it is a man or a woman. Besides that, thank you, Oban, for encouraging or reminding us of, the different types of options that one has, such as sex education, or places that they can actually go to reach out, that they can reach out for information. And also just for parents, those who consider themselves to be conservative parents, to sort of consider opening up more in order to avoid their children going behind their backs and seeking this information elsewhere from friends or from people who would really just want to take advantage of them, and then finding themselves in that situation, regardless of how strict the parenting was, just to be able to, as a family, approach these different types of places of help in order to prevent their children from finding themselves in this type of situation. So with that said, I'd like to thank our guests. I'd like to thank you both so much. You've both raised very important points, and I'm sure they will contribute in one form or another to the lives of our audiences, and that they will be able to be encouraged as well to take more responsibility for their actions, to seek out for help in a case of where maybe someone is violated, or to just be able to be more honest about who they are and about the children that they have, as a part of forming healthy relationships and avoiding them being put in a position where they're forced to abandon their children.
True.
So thank you so much again, Orban and Rosvita.
Thank
Thanks
you so
for having
much
us.
for having us.
We have come to the end of yet another informative episode. Be a part of the conversation and share your thoughts in the comment sections. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Apple Podcasts, as well as by following us on Instagram. Make sure to turn on your notifications and be up to date with all of our content. For expressions of interest or simply just to interact, reach us on our WhatsApp and email lines. This episode will be coming to you soon on your local community radio station. See bios for listings, links, and more information. This episode has been produced with the support of the Namibia Media Trust in collaboration with the Deutsche Welle Academy under the NXT Journalism Training Hub.